Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Stokastic.com NFL Sim Strategy Show. Little late start today, late in the sense that we pushed this back. Greg was actually accommodating me. I needed to move this back, but we said the show must go on. We will do this. And we've got conference championship. Look, there are 3 games left in the NFL season, 2 this weekend, then you got the Super Bowl. Pro Bowl doesn't count. But still some monster contests as always. And this is, look, who cares how many games there are if we're going to be getting these type of contests to close out the season. Fortunately, you've got, of course, big showdown slates, but also a milli maker on – actually, matter of fact, Greg, we have a milli maker for the 2-game slate, right? And obviously both games are on Sunday, so they're going to run one slate. But then you have $500 showdown for Kansas City, Baltimore, and then $1 million, $250K up top showdown slate for Detroit, San Francisco. So the way I see it is you have 2 games, but you have 3 main slates.
Yeah, and it's all stuff we're going to be covering, not just here on the show, but also over the weekend. So we did move the Live Before Lock show last week, our big one, from Sunday to Saturday because the main slate ended up covering all 4 games. So for this weekend, we're going to have the Deep Dive Live Before Lock on Sunday, and then Emac and I are also going to be doing a showdown show for the later one. So we're going to have the channel covering everything that's going on Sunday. So just want to let you guys know that is what our football coverage will be looking like this weekend.
Yeah, we got you covered, man. But hey, before you get comfortable, take one single second, hit that thumbs up, atone for your sins on a Friday morning, subscribe to the channel as well. And remember, if you're listening or watching after the fact, we see you, we hear you. Leave a comment down below. At the very least, we read them, try and respond to all the comments. And if you want to listen in podcast form, anything we have on this channel that has a shelf life, we've got you covered. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is you listen, leave a rating and a review there if you don't mind. It goes a long way for us. All right, so let's dive straight into it, man. Only 2 games to get into, but I'll say this much. When I look at this, I did the first look show with Ben on Wednesday, and we kind of dug in pretty deep. Why not? You know, there's only 2 games to talk about. From a quarterback perspective, like there is one guy that has far and away the best matchup against the bad secondary. Also coming off a rough game against the Green Bay Packers last week. I'm referring to Brock Purdy. But like Kansas City has a good secondary. Baltimore's got a stellar secondary. San Francisco's, defensively, they're very good. That isn't to say Jared Goff can't poke some holes in them. But like if there's one team that remains that has the weakest secondary, strong run defense, but clearly weakest pass defense, and we've seen that each of the last 5 weeks, they've coughed up 300-plus passing yards, and we're talking Baker Mayfield, twice to Nick Mullins, Dak Prescott, the list goes on. It is the Detroit Lions, so I'm going to be really interested to see what quarterback exposure looks like out of the gate here.
Yeah, and another thing, too, is there's only so many options to choose from, so I'm also kind of interested to see what our Lions exposure looks like, because I know that if you're just building one lineup, and not saying you in particular, talking to the audience, the you is kind of in general, the one player people are not going to want to play at quarterback is going to be Jared Goff. He'd be the first person that people write off. They're only building one lineup. So I'm interested to see what the Sims and the contest generator ends up doing with Jared Goff this weekend, because he's somebody who I could see being the one quarterback that doesn't pick up as much ownership as the other 3.
It's possible. I will say though, I have a sneaky suspicion that we're going to get a relatively decent amount of all these guys. We'll see. Why don't we dig into it?
Let's do it. Let's pull it up.
All right. So before we do any of the lineups and anything, Jacob, let's do what we do. Go to exposures and go to stack exposures. Let's just see where we stand to kick this one off. And by the way, this is the Sims tool. Most of you guys, I mean, look, it's what, 19, what's this, week 21? Like 20, week 19, 20, yeah, this is week 21. Most of you guys know we run the contest generator. And then the pre-contest simulator, which is, simulating these contests 40,000 times, trying to give you, like, the contest generator is trying to give you what the lineups will look like, trying to emulate what the field looks like. And then in the simulator, after you simulate that 40,000 times, giving you the best lineups based on pre-simulated ROI. If some of that seems confusing to you, we'll explain it throughout the show. And of course, Greg has a ton of tutorials on it, but it's helpful. It's won a lot of people, a lot of money. We're well north of millions of dollars won with the Sims tool. Like Tommy won, Tommy, who runs our written side, won 113K last week by he said he literally clicked 3 buttons. Like he He went full factory settings, Greg, and took 13.
Yeah, he had even said when I was talking to him about it that he didn't even want his own input. He was like, all right, whatever, just gonna run the sims, run the contest generator, and he just took the lineup that was at the top. He did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, so I had that same exact lineup, and I just played all of my lineups, throughout. Most of the contests I were in were, well, I ran the 25% and then I ran a bunch of 10% because a lot of the single entries in the play action are 10% up top. This one ended up in the play action, finished 10th. Did me no good whatsoever. But shout out to Tommy. Huge win. We saw Jorge take down 6K on $60 for NFL last. It was a good one for sure. So I'm hoping to repeat a little bit of that. But look at these ownership projections, or look at these exposures right now for stacks. I assume, so we're not going to get close to 100% here because it doesn't show QB +4. But
this is still fairly close, though. I'm just like really quick math here. This is like 90% of our lineups.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's 16 and 15 is 31, and 9 is 40, 50, and then 25 is 75, 80. So it's like 82%.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
There's going to be +4 stacks, and people also talking in the chat asking us about solo stacks. It is going to be very difficult to build a good solo lineup this weekend because if you're building a solo lineup, just think about the dynamics of it on a 2-game slate. Let's say you're playing Lamar Jackson with none of his pass catchers. What is the scenario where Lamar Jackson has, a really big game and then no other player on the Ravens has a good game outside of Lamar Jackson? But then you also have to consider, like, all right, so then you have like 3 pass catchers from the Lions are in that lineup. Like, how does that lineup fit together where Lamar Jackson is the optimal quarterback and some other quarterback doesn't go off, but the pass catchers do? I wouldn't play solo line. I wouldn't play an unstacked lineup for a 2-game NFL slate.
Neither would I, but I'm not surprised we're getting to a little bit of Lamar +1.
Yeah. +1, you can make a case for it. Solo is just it's really uphill sledding on a 2-game slate.
Absolutely. Even with a rushing upside heavy guy like Lamar Jackson, it's still pretty difficult. I mean, look, when you look at Lamar, the QB +2 makes a QB +3. You're going to end up with what, like Andrews, Flowers, and Beckham. Excuse me. Who knows how involved he's even going to be? Granted, last week they didn't need to do a whole lot through the air. I am curious though, like, do we consider Lamar plus Justice Hill lineups? QB, it would be a QB +2, but then it would be like Lamar Hill and Mark Andrews or Lamar Hill and Flowers.
I don't have an issue, especially for a 2-game slate, pairing a quarterback with the running back. I don't even care if the running back is a pass catcher. There's so few options that we could potentially get to on these slates at this point. And then also, as far as Justice Hill is concerned, we are not all that far removed from him having some really big games in the passing game anyway. I mean, the final game of the season against Pittsburgh, I know that it was, a different scenario there, but still he was targeted 10 times. The game before that, and this was with Lamar at quarterback, he had 5 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown. So Justice Hill, we've seen him involved in the passing game. I don't mind him as somebody who gets paired with Lamar Jackson, but you also can't be too selective about how you are trying to pair certain players with the quarterbacks, and even stuff like defense versus opposition. There's only so many lineup combinations to make on a 2-game slate.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I think if I'm going to do it, am I okay with, I guess, Lamar and Edwards? Sure. I would prefer Justice Hill still, just because, look, you're right. There's only so many combinations you can make, but you still kind of prefer the guy that actually has been involved as a pass catcher recently. And that's clearly Justice Hill. Like you said, week 18, tough to say much about that, but week 17, 5 targets for Justice Hill, in my opinion, particularly in that offense, man, that's significant. Not to mention that he had 13 carries. He paced the team in carries last week, despite some, semi-blowout run going to Dalvin Cook late in that one. So yeah, Justice Hill probably, I'll put it this way. I don't think there's a sub 5K running back that comes even close to being as good a play as Justice Hill this week.
Totally agreed, especially just for the purpose if you guys have a Lamar Jackson lineup, totally cool to combine them together as well. I do think there's some positive correlation there.
Can we look at just quarterback exposure for a second, Jacob? Like unstack just quarterbacks here. Let's see what we're coming in at. Want to see if there's anybody that's getting like unbalanced amount of QB +4. All right, so we're actually getting the least amount of Mahomes. And then look how tight that exposure is to Jackson, Goff, and Purdy.
And also something that's kind of interesting here to look at, because I wasn't exactly sure what our contest generator is going to project as far as ownership for this weekend. And this is a massive amount of chalk going into Brock Purdy. So only 4 quarterbacks to choose from on a 2-game slate, and nearly 40% of the field is expected to be playing Brock Purdy. So this is also why I was kind of curious about Jared Goff's projected ownership, because he is projected for only 16.5%. So we've got him and Mahomes being the 2 lower owned quarterbacks. So while we do have the least amount of Mahomes of all the quarterbacks, we are still about even with the field on him. We're getting way overweight to the field on Goff. And then Lamar Jackson, we're also about even to slightly overweight on him.
Yeah, look, people are gonna be keying in on the matchup there. There's just no doubt about it. That matchup to many is going to, and look, to myself included, it is a really good matchup. There's no doubt. Did Purdy look bad last week? Yeah, but it appears that most people are shaking that off. They don't really seem to care, Greg. I also don't care that much either. Like Green Bay's struggles have come largely on the ground, run defense. Their secondary is very good. And I know a lot of people took issues, Green Bay fans, with the defense, how that was run and everything. But Brock Purdy made mistakes, escaped somewhat unscathed. But at the same time, it was raining. It was bad. This is a much better matchup. Also, this might surprise some people. I was doing the betting video, the picks for every game video, only 2 this week, but picks for every game video over on the Odd Shopper channel. So it's like, let me take a look at this. Let me take a look at Brock Purdy on the season. Check this out. This might surprise you. So Brock Purdy under pressure this season, 2nd in yards, 2nd in completion percentage, because the Lions don't blitz all that often. However, they're good at generating pressure. 3rd in yards per attempt, 3rd in touchdowns. But what shocked me is everyone considers him as a guy that just gets rid of it and lets Debo or lets Kittle do the rest of the work, or lets McCaffrey pick up yards after catch. So while he didn't have the highest volume on deep attempts, the balls that travel 20+ yards downfield, 30 for 47 with an 11-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. That's very good. And Detroit struggles mightily against the deep ball. So objectively, this is a good spot for Brock Purdy. There's just no getting away from that.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that's still going to be my preference is going to be attacking the 49ers offense through Christian McCaffrey and the running game than through Brock Purdy. And the ownership on Brock Purdy is problematic for me. If the field is actually going to be rostering in 40% of lineups, that's a little bit too much Brock Purdy for me. I'd rather look elsewhere to just differentiate some lineups. But I could see why the field is getting to Purdy as much as they are.
I have no problem with differentiating, but I mean, well, let's see. If we go to running backs, then what's our pool ownership on McCaffrey?
It's probably pretty high.
It's got to be very high. Yeah, 70%.
Yeah, 3/4 of our lineups have McCaffrey in them. He's also going to be very popular, and a lot of the players on the 49ers are going to be popular this week. And we're still waiting on Deebo Samuel confirmation that he's going to be in, which we'll talk a little bit more at wide receiver. My gut feeling here is that Deebo plays, but won't really be 100%, but we'll make him an interesting tournament option because I think that's probably going to drive down his ownership. But yeah, we've got a lot of Christian McCaffrey lineups showing up. So we're still getting exposure to the 49ers. It's just not as much through Brock Purdy. It's with Christian McCaffrey instead.
Right. And I assume exactly what you said. If Deebo plays, which you think he probably will, he was limited yesterday. I would think that he plays, but he's not 100%. And that's kind of tough. Like, does the field downgrade him as a result, and then Deebo Samuel becomes a phenomenal play? I don't know if they do enough. Like if Purdy's going to be that high owned, I still assume there's going to be a decent amount of Deebo Samuel out there. Also, one of the reasons that that you're going to get so much McCaffrey and Brock Purdy is because people have no problem with a pass catching running back like Christian McCaffrey, who does he have 7 receiving touchdowns on the season? Like, is a focal point in the red zone in the passing game, people, and has 95 targets, people just are going to have no problem playing Brock Purdy with Christian McCaffrey.
For sure. And there's definitely a scenario where the touchdowns for the 49ers end up being rushing touchdowns for Christian McCaffrey. He had 14 of those this year, rushing touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a very clear way to get away from Brock Purdy in the passing game. You just go like, hey, I'm going to play Christian McCaffrey and hope the way they score touchdowns is McCaffrey running the football, which is a very live scenario that we all know about.
All right, so look at the rest of running backs here for a moment. You've got Pacheco, 48%. Justice Hill, okay. I'm not surprised to see 47% Justice Hill. Like we said a minute ago, he really is kind of the best value option on the board. 20% Gibbs, 7% Montgomery. Essentially no Gus Edwards. I'm trying to think, is there anybody else here? McCaffrey, Pacheco. Not really. No. The only spot to me that is somewhat concerning at times against good defenses is getting 3 times as much Gibbs as Montgomery, because Montgomery still is the guy that they'll use around the goal line. You know, when Gibbs scores, generally speaking, he's scoring from a little bit further out, outside the 10, which he can do, but it's a tough matchup against a very good run defense. He's one of the most shifty, elusive guys in the league, but I also think this could end up being, assuming, like, let's say it stays close, one of those games where Montgomery does get a healthy workload. The only problem is Montgomery absolutely needs to score. Gibbs just the problem, man. Greg, Gibbs is so dependent. Not to say he hasn't gotten there for us, but he is so dependent on efficiency.
Yeah, and I actually do think this game sets up pretty well for Gibbs and the construction of our lineups as a whole, because Jahmyr Gibbs is the higher upside pass catcher than David Montgomery is. And, you know, football can be random, but if we're going to talk about the most likely game script for this game, it is the 49ers winning and leading in the later stages of the game. Let me check. What is the most recent spread for this game now?
7.5, 7.
Yeah, so 7.5 and pretty high total as well, 51.5 points. So what we're expecting is the most likely game script here is the 49ers are leading. If the 49ers are leading late in the game, I think that's probably going to be they're putting the ball in the hands of Christian McCaffrey. I don't know how much they're going to trust Brock Purdy to be making plays downfield if they are up 7 or 14 points in the fourth quarter. So here's where our lineups come together and make sense for a game theory perspective. If we are underweight to the field on Brock Purdy, we're overweight to the field on Christian McCaffrey, we're painting a game script where the 49ers are leading in the later stages of the game and they're running the football. In that kind of scenario, what are the Lions doing when they're on offense? Well, they're throwing the football to try to catch back up in the game. And that's where I think we see Jahmyr Gibbs on the field as opposed to David Montgomery. And that's also where we see a little bit more of an upside for Gibbs, especially getting that full PPR bonus on DraftKings. So Montgomery is going to be the less popular of the two. We've got him for about half the ownership of Jahmyr Gibbs, but I do strongly prefer Gibbs over Montgomery, especially in the makeup of our lineups.
Yeah, I do too. It's tough because both of those spots are difficult, just given how efficiency-based Jahmyr Gibbs is. But you're right. They will use him in the passing game. There's no doubt about that. But still, like, you look at the last 2 games, 3 games for that matter, 13 carries, 1 target, 8 carries, 4 targets, 9 attempts. There are 9 carries, 4 targets. I mean, kind of has to score.
One other thing to add is we are underweight to both Gibbs and Montgomery. So we have more of Gibbs than Montgomery, but these are the 2 running backs that we are so 3 running backs we're underweight to. Gibbs, Montgomery, Gus Edwards. We're underweight to them, and then we're overweight to Hill, Pacheco, McCaffrey. So there's 6 running backs that are outside of like the galaxy brain crazy plays. There's 6 reasonable running backs to look at on the slate. We're overweight to 3, we're underweight to 3, and Gibbs and Montgomery are 2 guys that we are underweight to.
Agreed. And look, the only way that Elijah Mitchell or Clyde Edwards-Helaire or any of those guys get any significant work is if there's an injury. And if you want to play for that, fine. But Ben and I talked about this the other day, and I think this is super important. The only way, like the most difficult path to getting good value in the postseason is going to these cheap running backs because – and I'm not including Justice Hill. I'd argue that he's probably a little bit underpriced given his recent workload. But it's because the minimum salary is $4,000. Minimum salary at wide receiver is $3K. Noah Gray is $2,500 at minimum salary. Craig Reynolds scored last week. He had 1 attempt for 1 yard and a touchdown. He had 6.1 fantasy points. If you, as Greg said, galaxy brain Craig Reynolds, it still probably hurt you. It still didn't help you, because you look at an MVS, he only had like 2 or 3 receptions, still had more fantasy points than that, and you got him at $1,000 discount or whatever it was. So, like, if you're trying to go crazy on these cheap running backs, you're literally, your only hope is you're unless it's like Clyde Edwards-Helaire breaks a 60-yard touchdown against this Baltimore defense, but really your only hope is an injury. And ultimately, Greg, why not just try and go as cheap as possible at the other positions where you could haul in a deep ball or two, and then that seals the deal?
For sure. And another thing, too, to consider about this slate and how it fits into this particular one is we have Christian McCaffrey to pay up for a running back, right? And Christian McCaffrey's been an absolute monster for fantasy purposes. There isn't a comparable wide receiver to play on this slate. There's no CeeDee Lamb.
Right.
There's
St. Brown, but he's facing San Francisco.
Yeah. So Amon-Ra St. Brown. And even then, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, as good of a season he has, I don't put him in the same fantasy category as, like a Tyreek Hill or Christian McCaffrey. So with that in mind, if I'm going to save money to spend up at one of the other skill positions, I would rather save money at wide receiver and spend up for Christian McCaffrey than spend my money for Amon-Ra St. Brown and then save money with a cheap running back. So all those things being considered, I do much prefer spending up for McCaffrey and not taking one of these dark, crazy galaxy brain chances on a cheap running back. I'm willing to do it at wide receiver, though.
Me too. By the way, I suppose we probably could put Amon-Ra St. Brown in the same category as some of these guys. I mean, yeah, Tyreek Hill averaged like 2.6 more fantasy points per game. So he's better for sure. CeeDee Lamb averaged 2.8 more per game. Amon-Ra St. Brown was the wide receiver 3 this year, though, Greg. And he was fantastic. He really was. But to your point, I still don't put him in the same category as Christian McCaffrey, especially when you factor matchup into this as well. Like Christian McCaffrey, I know that Detroit has a good run game or run defense, but they'll cough up passing yards. You'll see McCaffrey run wheel routes and shit too. Like, this guy is going to be out there. Another thing, it isn't all that often. I did mention this last week that I thought you could see McCaffrey play 100% of snaps in this game. He played 63 of 64 snaps. He played 98% of snaps. You're getting the best running back on the planet playing every single snap at home as a 7.5-point favorite. Not really sure the argument to be made against that.
Yeah. So as far as running back, I like Christian McCaffrey. And on the cheap, if I have to punt with one cheap running back, it's going to be Justice Hill, because we've seen some of that passing game upside that he has. But I'm not willing to take chances on like Dalvin Cook, who I assume is somebody we're going to see some questions about.
For sure. And by the way, I don't even see this as like, man, if I have to punt Justice Hill. I think at 4,800, Justice Hill's pretty good. Yeah,
he's our 3rd most rostered running back, and one we're most overweight too, because he's projected for, it's only a 2-game slate, so there's limited options. He's projected for 33% ownership, which is significant, but it's not insane chalk or anything like that. So we've got Justice Hill in about half of our lineups. He's the running back we're most overweight to.
Look, you watched the Kansas City game last week, right? You watched the Kansas City and Bills game. Yeah, well, had McDermott not just completely gone away from the run game, they'd probably win that. I mean, Kansas City was getting gashed on the ground, man. Their secondary is extraordinarily strong. But on the season, they allowed what? Let's see. The 7th most yards per attempt on the ground. This is not a run defense that's particularly stout. So I look at it and I go, hey, could Pacheco struggle against Baltimore's defense? Could Montgomery and Gibbs struggle against the San Francisco run defense, or just the San Francisco defense in general? It wouldn't be shocking if Justice Hill ended up being the RB2 on this slate. I'm not saying that that's what we're projecting him for, but I don't think it would be shocking. And at 4,800, he's not just a good play, but he's the only play down there.
And something else that's relevant about this is It's not like we have him projected for a ton of fantasy points. People are like, oh, Justice Hill, like what is his upside? We have him projected for 8.8 fantasy points. An 8.8 fantasy point projection is what gets him into half of our lineups here.
Right. Johnny Joe Dillinger, gotta bounce. Boss is yelling at me. Shouldn't have married her. Go Chiefs. Thanks for the info. Yeah, man. It's a give and take situation. You know what I mean? But my clothes are always clean and folded. And there's always dinner on the table, brother. Anyway.
Not mine.
One day, you never know, man. One day. You'll be having to make that dairy-free stuff for you.
I actually do have a pretty good situation because since my brother is married and so my brother is married and my brother and I own a house together. So my sister-in-law, who is actually a professional chef, does cook a lot.
Oh man, that's nice.
It's actually a very good setup.
That's solid.
Yeah.
Now, do you buy the ingredients for her? Do you guys buy the stuff?
Yeah. So like that's my role, right? Like I work and I'll buy stuff.
Yeah,
and
she just
it's
that's
a deal
a win.
for me, though.
Don't get married. That's a win right there.
Yeah, so I've got a good situation because I finish my shows at night because I'm on, NBA Live for Lock just about every single night. And then I'm done, go in the kitchen. There's always food sitting out for me.
Yeah, that's a huge win. You know what else is a win? PrizePicks. Because right now, $100 first match deposit bonus, 100%. So you double your deposit bonus up to $100, whether it's 20, 50, 10, 75, 80, 100. You're doubling it out of the gate. Your bankroll is times 2 what it was when you started. But also, Greg, an entirely free month of Odd Shopper Premium. Huge win, $50 value. Includes the premium Discord, the expert picks, and all of our plus EV market-based picks for PrizePicks that build out the highest projected plus EV lineups, highest ROI lineups for you, right? We have the Sims tool, a powerful tool for DFS. Well, don't think we don't have stuff for betting and for pick'em contests either, because we do. We have everything built out. If you haven't been on Odd Shopper yet, here's your opportunity. Links in the description for PrizePicks if you're not there. Link is in the chat. You click it, sign up, and then you'll hear. We'll hit you up. We'll get you that free month. You'll get your deposit bonus. Do we have any free squares going for PrizePicks, new users, or just free picks in general?
There is. I'm actually going to right here share my screen because I want to throw up, or if you have access to the PrizePicks entry builder, Jacob, let's see why is it not showing the share screen thing on StreamYard for me right now?
Present.
Where did it go? Is it because I'm having just such a senior moment? I do so much content through StreamYard, and here it is. All right. For whatever reason, the button was missing from my screen. I had to change. Sure. I had to change the size of my screen to make it show up. Here we go. Okay. So I put together here while you're doing that, Lofty, a entry builder here on Odd Shopper where you could build PrizePicks entries. So using our projections for NFL games, then there is a free square. Christian McCaffrey over 0.5 rushing yards.
I think he'll get there.
I do as well. If he doesn't, my DFS lineups are certainly going to suck this weekend if he gets the under on this. And then I've got bigger problems. So building this out on PrizePicks, where we have the Christian McCaffrey free square to utilize, this is expected to win 10% of the time. Expected EV 333%.
Because of the free square.
Because we got the free square in here. But we've got Jared Goff for under 1.5 total rushing yards. We've got Gus Edwards over 3.5 total receiving yards. Rashad Bateman under 23.5 total receiving yards. Noah Gray over 9.5 total receiving yards. Mecole Hardman under 9.5 total receiving yards. So it's a long shot play for sure. But we've got a 6-leg flex parlay. There is one free square that's in here as well, something to take advantage of. And if you guys sign up at Odd Shopper using our link for PrizePicks, you're going to get access to this. So it's got PrizePicks in here. It's got Underdog. And then also if you guys just like traditional sports betting, it's got every other book you could possibly think of. So comes with it. Free month, like Lofty said, when you sign up at PrizePicks.
Yeah, brother. Link in the description and in chat. Free square on McCaffrey, 100% deposit bonus up to $100. Free month of everything we have at Odd Shopper. That's a win, baby. Check it out if you're not there yet. By the way, not just football, but for literally every other sport, PrizePicks has it, and we have it at Odd Shopper. So once football ends and once there isn't as much football like right now, you'll have access to every other sport included on top of that. All right, so wide receivers. I saw a comment from a little while ago, and it was in our chat. Let me find this. Because I agree, by the way. From DD, he said, picking the right lotto ticket wide receiver is the most critical component on this slate. Spray and pray from a group of 5 or 10 dudes. So I agree that everyone's going to have McCaffrey. A lot of people are going to have Purdy. Even Goff is still going to be like 16 to 20% owned, right? It's not like he's going to be unowned. You're still going to have Lamar Jackson, Zay, all of these guys. I could go down the list. You get it, right? And we'll look at tight ends. My guess, because the tight end position is priced in a way that is not commensurate with production compared to other positions. Like if George Kittle and Sam Laporta and Kelsey had wide receiver titles, they would for sure be priced more than they are on a slate like this, but they're not. So now, what do we have? You got wide receivers, and no one's going to know what to do with Kansas City. No one's going to know what to do with Nelson Aguilar, right? No one's going to know what to do if Debo's a little banged up. Does Ray McLeod get more work? Like, what's going to happen? Conley, Jamison Williams, Josh Reynolds, all of these guys. I think this is the pivotal spot on pretty much any lineup you build, Greg.
What is the current projected ownership we have in the contest generator that showed up for Debo? If you wouldn't mind scrolling down a little bit, Jacob, or just search for Debo, because I'm trying to find him on screen and I don't see him. But I mean, I've already displayed that I'm an idiot trying to find stuff on my screen just a couple minutes ago. So he also might be right in front of me and I'm just missing it. Where is Debo? Yeah, so it looks like he isn't really showing up in lineups, which kind of makes me curious how low his projected ownership is. Because he's if the field is actually only playing Debo like 4 or 5% or something like that, which I understand people not wanting to play him with uncertainty about his health and that he could be on a snaps limit or something like that. Give me the upside, though, on a 2-game slate. If we could get Debo at this low of ownership, and for all we know, he might go out and feel good on Sunday. Maybe feel shitty all week, but then Sunday rolls around and he feels much better than he did earlier in the week. There are only so many ways you could reasonably play contrarian players that have upside on a 2-game slate. Debo Samuel might be an all-time contrarian play to get to.
It's entirely possible. And it's against the Lions. It could go very well for him if he's in better condition than we thought. Can you go up one more time, Jacob? I just want to look at our exposures here to some of these. So, okay, Ayuk, no surprise. Jamison Williams, Reynolds, Rashad Bateman, here's another cheap one. Mecole Hardman is dirt cheap. Justin Watson is dirt cheap. MVS. So here's my only thing, Greg, and I mentioned this on Wednesday. I'll say it again. I do think, if I'm playing even 20 lineups, right? 30, 40, it doesn't have to be 150 lineups. I'm probably going to make some manual adjustments to where I'm not just getting like 1 or 2 of these value receivers and then trace amounts of the others. I don't feel comfortable. You know what? If it works, it works. And then guess what? You're in amazing shape because now you have 50% of a $3,700 player. I just don't like one of these guys that much more than the other. I feel like there's way too many variables going into these cheap guys this week.
Yeah, I think it's a great slate to mix and match. And there are other places where we could have our core options, right? Like we saw Christian McCaffrey, core guy for our lineups, somebody who's going to be in like 3/4 of them. So if you're playing a handful of lineups, it is very reasonable to take a stand and say, like, you know what, I'm playing Christian McCaffrey, and let's say you're somebody who 20 maxes, maybe go, I'm playing Christian McCaffrey in 17, 18 of those lineups. And then what you do is you just rotate cheap wide receivers around and enable you to pay up for them. I think that's a pretty good way to approach this slate.
It's tough too. I mean, look, if we were to go to tight ends, I'm guessing that we have that we're going to have more than 100% exposure to tight ends by a wide margin. Yeah, I mean, look at that.
And also for people who were asking about what we're doing with Mark Andrews, because there was somebody in the chat, it was Chris Carmahan was asking us what is our data doing with Mark Andrews. So we have him in, but restricted right now, which is why he's in here. He's showing up in lineups, but only project for 9.5 fantasy points. It's a really difficult situation to navigate. Same with the Debo one as of right now. But I think that's the right way to project Mark Andrews, is to play, but be somewhat limited and have him for like, what is that? Probably something like 70% of what his normal projection would look like.
Yeah. And even on this slate, that's not that bad. But look at this. This is almost like, this is all probably 190% exposure just eyeballing this to tight ends.
Yeah, a lot of double tight end lineups. And it's a strong tight end slate. I mean, we've got Laporta, Kittle, Kelsey, Andrews. If you want to take a punt on somebody like Isaiah Likely or Noah Gray, I think that's viable, especially you brought it up earlier in the show about Noah Gray's $2,500. If a bunch of studs go off on this slate, it could be the only way to get all of them into your lineup is you threw in a $2,500 punt tight end into lineups, which I suspect is the reason we're getting the lineups with Noah Gray. He's only projecting for 3 fantasy points for us. It's not like our data saying Noah Gray is such a good points per dollar play that you must play him. There's a lack of value, and he enables you to pay up for other stars because of how cheap he is.
Yeah, and then anyone else in this price range, even above this price range, is projecting for something similar. But just think about it in comparison to what I was saying. The pricing at tight end doesn't match up with the other positions, and this is often the case. But would you rather play? This is why you're going to get so many dual tight end lineups. Would you rather play a $5,500 Gus Edwards or a $5,300 Kittle? Would you rather play $5,600 Montgomery or $5,300 Kittle, or $5K Andrews, $5,400 Laporta, 66 Kelsey is up there. But some of these guys just are underpriced based on their projection. There's no doubt about that. And it's exactly why I'm very comfortable getting 2 tight ends. And then to expand on that, you just pointed it out. I'm comfortable getting one of these top 4 tight ends and then Noah Gray in the flex or it would actually be Noah. That's the early game, but you get the point. Noah Gray at tight end or flex if you're playing like Gray and Andrews. It's unimportant because how much worse is that punt than Rashad Bateman, who you'd be paying $1,000 more for?
Yeah, it is. And then a couple of players that you had brought up there that you were kind of comparing is, so David Montgomery is $5,600. George Kittle is $5,300. We have Montgomery projected for 8 fantasy points. We have Kittle projected for 14.8.
Right.
And that is with Kittle being $300 less expensive. So people bring up all the time, they're just like, I don't want to play 2 tight ends. There's certainly scenarios where it doesn't make sense to play 2 tight ends, but remove the position from the discussion. Just look at what the projections of the players are, what their price points are. It's very sensible to be playing 2 tight end lineups for this weekend.
And also, you got Ben. I think Ben may have slightly disagree with me, but you could very much make the argument that the top 4 tight ends in the league are all on this slate.
Yeah.
Hawkinson, yes, I get it. Hawkinson probably be a decent example, but with the way Laporta has played, Kelsey's not dead yet. Mark Andrews is back. Kittle's amazing. You could make the argument that the 4 best tight ends in the league are all on the same 2-game slate, and they're all pretty affordable. So yeah, you better believe that I'm willing to get 2 tight. I have no issues with that at all. Oh, $5K Mark Andrews or $4,600 Juwan Jennings. Okay. Yeah. Twist my arm.
I'm trying to think. I don't even know who I would say. You mentioned Hawkinson. Outside of him, though, I don't even know who you would consider to be one of the top tight ends that isn't.
Goddard had a big down season. Njoku had an amazing kind of resurgence with Flacco, but you're not putting him up there yet. He still drops a lot of passes, and it was like, 5 games?
Yeah.
It's not Kyle Pitts. Darren Waller's not that guy anymore. It's these 4 plus Hawkinson, right? Who else is it? Who else would it be?
Yeah, I think pretty clearly we have a top 5 as far as tight ends go, and 4 on the slate. It's funny too because we have so many. How many 12-game main slates do we have where all of the tight ends suck? Because teams like the Chiefs are playing in prime time, the Ravens are playing in prime time, and now we've got a 2-game slate that has what are likely the 4 best tight ends in the league.
Yep. I was corrected in chat from Preston. Said Jennings, not John. I said Juwan Johnson. I was thinking New Orleans Saints there. Sean V said Laporta's knee is a concern. So going into last week, I would have agreed with you. I don't really think that's the case anymore. Last week, they used him far more frequently. I understand that he played 80% of snaps in wildcard weekend, but he still was not 100%. It was very evident, and he was only targeted 3 times despite scoring 88% of snaps last week. But then you consider the production. 11 targets, 9 receptions for 65 yards. No, he didn't score, but that is still a far, far more significant workload. And then at the end of the day, you're talking about a 26% target share for Laporta last week. After seeing that, I'm not really concerned with him at all, honestly.
Here's the other side of it. What if we just concede to it? Go like, yeah, his knee's fucked up. He's not 100%. What if him not at 100% is good enough for him to have 11 targets, catch 9 of them for 65 yards? If this is him at not 100%, what do I care? If he's 70% and 70% Laporta is good enough for 9 catches for 65 yards.
Right. It doesn't. Yeah, exactly. Plus, I mean, look, am I a little surprised that we're getting 50%? Maybe, but then I see we got almost 50% Kittle. Also, if Deebo Samuel ends up not playing, we're going to get more than 50% Kittle. I have zero doubt in my mind. He's just fantastic when one of those guys is out, particularly Deebo. 38% Kelsey, 25% Andrews. Yeah, we have Kelsey projecting for 16.97, Kittle for 15, and Laporta for 13.3. What do you make of that, though, that we're getting more Laporta than Kittle despite 1.5 fewer fantasy point projection? I mean, this must just be an ownership thing and a pure leverage spot here in the Sims.
So it's 2 things. One, it's ownership because he's projected for 31.5% ownership, whereas Kittle's at 47.5%. The other part of it, too, is our quarterback exposures. We have a lot more of Jared Goff than we have of Brock Purdy, which is also due to ownership. Goff has, like half the projected ownership of Brock Purdy, something around there. I think it was actually maybe even less.
It was like 16%.
Yeah, so it was right around like 40% or so of the ownership going to Jared Goff relative to Brock Purdy. And then also we have all of that exposure that we're getting to Christian McCaffrey. So our exposure to the Lions is coming from Jared Goff. It's coming from Sam Laporta. It's coming from some of the wide receivers. Our exposure to the 49ers, some of it is going to George Kittle, but a lot of it is going to Christian McCaffrey. So the lineups make more sense if you have Jared Goff at quarterback to contain Sam Laporta than to contain George Kittle, especially when a lot of those lineups already have Christian McCaffrey.
Makes sense to me. Let's take a look at the lineups. We didn't really do much of that yet. And also, guys, I know football's winding down, but Sims Tool is out there for NBA, for any of these sports. If you're ever interested, links to everything in the description for the lineup generator, for the Sims packages, you name it. We got you covered, man, across the board. I'll say this much, though, before we get into these lineups and get out of here. If there's one thing around football season that you should take advantage of, it has to be the sign-up bonuses that sportsbooks give you. Like I know we talked about PrizePicks earlier. I can't play on PrizePicks. I'm in Pennsylvania. I can play on sportsbooks, however, and I have milked them for everything they have when it comes to sign-up bonuses. If you're on DraftKings and FanDuel already, likely the case, their sportsbooks aren't going to give you anything if they already know they got you roped in on DFS. BetMGM right now, it's the first link in the description down there. You'll see it. First link. Whether you're watching now or after the fact, you bet $5 and get $158 in bonus bets. That's it. That's all there is to it. If you win your bet, you get paid out. You get paid out and you get the bonus bets. If you lose your bet, you lose your original $5 stake, but you still have $158 in bonus bets. And assume you lose all those bonus bets too. At the end of the day, all you lost is $5. As Ben puts it, technically, you would have lost a lot more. Because that $158 in bonus bets, you would have bet that somewhere else and lost it. So it's a legitimate free roll. And if there's one thing we talk about here all the time on the channel and on the Oddshopper channel is just find value, find edges, deliver anything you can, whenever you can. When you get free money thrown at you in the form of bonus bets like BetMGM is doing right now because the Super Bowl's coming up, you take it. You got to be 21 years or older to gamble. And if you have a problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. But in the event that you don't, bet $5, get 158. You only have to deposit 5. Use the link in the description to take advantage of that. Only takes a minute to sign up. All right, let's talk about these lineups for a second. We saw how many 2 tight end lineups we were going to be getting, so I just actually want to see this in the flesh, Greg. And look, there you go. Look how is there a single 1 tight end lineup even on the screen? There's one. There's one.
Yeah, I'm looking through Kittle, Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, Kittle, Laporta. Yeah,
the last one.
The last one is Brandon Ayuk in the flex spot, and that's it. And that's the way that I think a lot of my lineups are going to end up looking. I know it's Friday afternoon, so maybe things could end up changing by the time we get to Sunday. I doubt it, though. I very highly doubt it, especially when you look at our tight end projections relative to our projections for comparably priced wide receivers and comparably priced running backs. You want to be playing a lot of the tight ends. And if anything, that's going to be even more favorable for the tight ends. If Deebo Samuel is ruled out, Kittle's projection is going to go up, and that's going to make us want to play even more tight ends in lineups.
Jacob, can you slow scroll through this for a second? So I'm seeing some QB +4, Greg, which essentially, if I had to guess, every single one of them is going to include a running back from that team.
Probably.
And if not everyone, almost all of them, right? That's just the way it is. Are you fine with QB +4 spots this week?
If there are any games that are a blowout this weekend, a QB +4 lineup is fairly likely to win. Because if a game is a blowout, you're basically saying that now, all right, there's only 3 teams you could find optimal players from. So it's not to say that the majority of our lineup should be QB +4. If I remember correctly on our QB and stack exposures, it was something like 18% of our lineups are QB +4. But that's the scenario where it happens. If the 49ers go out and blow out the Lions this weekend and no Lions players are optimal, well, now you are only pulling players from the 49ers, the Chiefs, the Ravens as potentially being optimal. And then it's going to just really narrow down your correlated options to being heavily stacked quarterbacks. So that's a scenario where it makes sense.
Absolutely. It does. Do I always love it? No, but you know what? You're playing for all of the possibilities here. And on a 2-game slate, like you said, if there's a blowout on a 2-game slate, that changes everything. Like that shifts everything that we thought we knew going into the slate for sure. But yeah, you're going to see a lot of QB4 with the running back, which makes sense. Like Jared Goff, actually that one might not. That's the first one I've seen that doesn't. Jared Goff with St. Brown, Reynolds, Williams, and Laporta. So like, yeah, that is an insane lineup. There's no doubt about it, but it's there.
And is McCaffrey in that lineup?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I could paint a game script that would make sense. If the 49ers end up winning that game, 35-28, the total is also outrageously high in that game.
Kittle's also in it, by the way.
Season. If McCaffrey and the 49ers offense has a big game, and the touchdowns go to Christian McCaffrey, and the Lions are playing catch up to stay in the game, yeah, you could see Jared Goff throwing for 350 yards, and the pass catchers outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown are not all that expensive. Laporta's relatively cheap. Jameson Williams is fairly cheap. Reynolds is fairly cheap. There's certainly a scenario that makes sense.
Yeah. And Kittle's in that too. So it's McCaffrey and Kittle. So that's the real, like you said, that's the San Francisco goes up early and then the game still sees like 60 total points. Yeah. Makes sense. I think we covered everything we can. This is pretty good stuff here. Just looking over the exposures. A lot of it's what I expected too. 2 tight ends and a ton of lineups because of the kind of mispricing compared to the other positions. A lot of Justice Hill, a lot of Brock Purdy, a lot of McCaffrey. Trying to think if anything stands out to where I'm like, wow, I guess the only one that stands out to me is a little bit surprising, although I do technically understand it because he's playing, 60+% of snaps each week, is the 50+% exposure to Jameson Williams.
Yeah, it is a lot going to Williams, but if you were to ask me of every single cheap wide receiver on this slate, one of them is going to catch a 50-yard touchdown pass. Which one is it most likely to be? I would, without hesitation, say Jameson Williams.
Of all the cheap guys, you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of the
I
cheap
got
guys.
you. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, because MVS can barely track those balls. No, don't get me wrong. Jameson Williams has had some issues with drops himself. But I appreciate you guys hanging out. It's been awesome, man. We should do this for the Super Bowl still. I mean, why not?
Yeah,
They're going to have a
course.
Millie Maker for sure.
Yeah, we'll do we could certainly do the Sims show for the Super Bowl. Same deal. We'll do it the Friday morning / afternoon leading up to that Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. And also, Sims breakdowns for the showdown are super intriguing to me because now you start dealing with dupes, like a lot of dupes. You start dealing with, especially on DraftKings, where it's more nuanced. Okay. Like you'd love to get McCaffrey a captain, but what are you paying for? If you end up having a Super Bowl where you have McCaffrey and Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews and Debo and Brandon Ayuk, you have to make some adjustments. It's just a different game. So I think that could actually be fun to break down a showdown slate, particularly for the Super Bowl.
We did get before we leave, we got a super chat from Jorge. Left us.
Oh, thanks, Jorge.
During the show, he said, "Looking for another win this Sunday. So congrats on the win you had the other day." And then he says, "Thoughts on Detroit's rush defense versus CMC? Maybe a good move to go low on him." My preference is to play Christian McCaffrey. You saw in the lineups we're building here, he showed up in 3/4 of them. There's a very limited amount of spend up options on the slate to really go up with our salaries. So you could go to Lamar Jackson at QB, go to Christian McCaffrey at running back. We've got Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver. Of all those players, the one that I have the most amount of confidence paying up for is Christian McCaffrey. So I would recommend that you don't get off McCaffrey.
I agree. I mean, Baltimore has a very stout run defense. He had 14 for 103 and a touchdown against them, 28 fantasy. Like, it's just if you're telling me that McCaffrey is going to play essentially 100% of snaps, I don't care who he's going up against. Really, I don't think it matters. You know, he's just that good. He's that involved. More than anything, he's that involved. Last week he saw 17 rushing attempts and 12 targets. That's 29 looks in a playoff game. Yeah, just got to do it. Thank you though, Jorge. Appreciate you, man, and congrats on that win last week. Eric Johnson, CMC sucks. Horrible play. You got it, brother. With that, follow Greg at G Ehrenberg DFS, me at Lavi_D. And as always, all season, shout out to Jacob for working the controls behind the scenes here, helping us navigate these sims and show you guys what we're working with. BetMGM 5 in the 158 in the description. PrizePicks, free month of Odd Shopper, plus the 100% deposit bonus, plus the free Christian, unless you're Eric Johnson because he sucks. I think Eric's joking, by the way. Kittle's a good play. Half a rushing yard on Christian McCaffrey. That's down there. And all of our Sims tools, lineup generators, we got you covered. Everything in the description. But appreciate you guys. You're the best. We'll see you back here next week. But first, a little deeper dive live before lock action coming up this Sunday. Peace.